Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Football, Episode 13, Week 15. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Mad Mouth, along with Ryan Skolrud. Ryan, how you doing? I'm the only one that's changed time zones. I'm in the Central Time Zone here in Racine, Wisconsin, and you're out in the Pacific Northwest. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, enjoying the rain as we always do this time of year out in Seattle. So having a good day.
Yeah, I'm in a little bit of a different weather element, although I got to tell you, on the way back up from Florida, we're in 20-degree weather, but, I like this weather because for all those people down in southern Florida that complain how cold it is, I said, get a life. I don't care. I was up in 20-degree weather and loved every minute of it. Thankfully, I only have to rent this stuff. I do not have to own it. But for a lot of those individuals out there in fantasy world, we're going to touch on a lot of different things today. We're going to lead it off with Josh Jacobs, right, Ryan?
Yeah, Josh Jacobs. For those of you who in your fantasy leagues went out and got and spent fab dollars or your waiver priority to get DeAndre Washington, who had a pretty decent game this last week for the Raiders. You will be disappointed unless you already had Josh Jacobs, because Josh Jacobs' MRI came back clean, and it looks like this is only going to be a 1-week absence for him. He should be good to go this weekend for their game. So as far as we can tell, Jacobs has been practicing. He should be okay for this weekend. So again, I somewhat almost feel bad for those who went and got DeAndre Washington off waivers and everything, but if you already had Josh Jacobs, it was a great handcuff. If you were desperate for running backs and that's where you spent your fab dollars, unfortunately, I think you're probably going to be disappointed this week.
How effective do you think Josh Jacobs will be?
I think that he should still be okay. It all matters on how much pain he's dealing with in his shoulder when he gets hit. And for running backs, shoulder injuries can be absolutely brutal. And we looked at Dalvin Cook and how mobile and how much he could do after getting hit in the shoulder. Was it 3 weeks ago against the Broncos? And he ended up getting one strong, hard shot to the chest shoulder area again in the same spot against the Seahawks. And then they ended up pulling him for an entire half of the game. So it really depends on his pain tolerance and how much pain he can deal with. But I think as long as he can handle pain, overall he should still be overall pretty effective. He can do the power move and start bowling people over. At the same time, he's one of those guys that he does have some shiftiness available to him as well.
Okay. One guy who's in a lot more pain, though, unfortunately, will be dealing with it is a guy by the name of Mike Evans. You say he's likely to miss the rest of the season?
The last update I saw, it looks like it's almost a foregone conclusion that he will be missing the rest of the season, weeks 15 through 17. As of right now, he's listed as doubtful. Actually, no. It looks like the network. It just came up. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reports that Mike Evans is out for the rest of the season. So that is it for him. So as far as it goes for the Buccaneers and for fantasy wise, obviously Chris Godwin becomes the one and only number one wide receiver instead of kind of being a 1A and 1B between Evans and Godwin. I mean, Godwin should get a ton of play this week. Should be a huge target, especially if you're playing in DFS leagues. Should be a huge target for you there. As far as players in that offense that could possibly be picked up, I know that Brashad Perriman is definitely one that people have targeted. Played pretty well this last week. I'm trying to think. There was one other wide receiver. I'm pulling up his name right now. Justin Watson, I think was his name. Finished with 8 targets last week after Evans went down. So he's another guy that could possibly provide a little bit of value to someone who is desperate for some wide receiver help with them going up against, I believe, the Detroit Lions this week.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure that if you have Buccaneer players playing against the Detroit Lions, you should have some pretty good fantasy value. We'll get to the game in a little while. All right, let's talk about more people that are on pain, and we're going to talk about the ones that are on IR. Lead it off.
Yeah, there were a lot of names. This was every year we always have 1 week where just everyone seems to go down. And we always did on the Skulking podcast. We've always done what we call our infirmary report, like the worst week. That's what that's our infirmary report. Well, that seems to be this week. Rashad Penny tore his ACL, and he is out for the season for the Seahawks. So, in terms of the Seahawks, obviously Chris Carson is already the number one there. I think that means that they're probably going to keep a little bit more on Chris Carson. Maybe put a little bit more of a load on him. But he has some decent matchups coming up. The Carolina Panthers, who give up the most fantasy points to running backs in the league. You've got the Arizona Cardinals, and then a tough matchup in Week 17, which none of your leagues should ever have championships in Week 17. Too many teams have sealed up things and are sitting stars, and that just makes fantasy a bad thing to deal with in Week 17. So for the next 2 weeks, he has very good matchups. Guys that could possibly get a little extra work. CJ Prosise, especially his ability in the passing game, could give you a little bit of a bump as a guy as a running back that could give you some help. Farther down the depth chart, I don't know how much work he'll actually get. Is Travis Homer, the rookie out of Miami? It's possible that he could get a little work, but for right now, they're loving what he is doing in the kick return game and on special teams. They may try to just keep him to that, and really just as much as they can split the load between Carson and Prosise. So next on the list, Marvin Jones. A lot of people didn't realize that he had much of an injury, but apparently it's enough that it's a long enough injury that they're just simply putting him on IR and out for the rest of the season. So Kenny Golladay obviously was already the number one wide receiver. Could put a little bit more of a workload on him, as well as Danny Amendola maybe getting some more work this way, just in terms of being a guy who's healthy and there. So I think Amendola gets the biggest bump. They're two very different receivers, and so Amendola is much more that slot, work the middle kind of a guy, where Marvin Jones is very much the over-the-top speed guy, the 9-route, fly route. So it's a different role, but it should provide opportunity for Amendola to produce for fantasy. So another big injury, Darius Geis. As far as it's an MCL sprain that he is dealing with, so nothing is torn. They've done MRIs on his knee. Structurally, his ACL is fine, which is good news considering he came off the ACL injury from last season going into this season. And so structurally, for the most part, everything is fine. It's enough of a sprain that, they're out of it really in terms of contention for the season. So they are just shutting him down, which is probably the best move for his future and the future of the franchise for the most part at the running back position. So as long as Chris Thompson can actually get healthy and stay healthy, he should get a lot of the passing down work for the Redskins, and obviously Adrian Peterson becomes the main running back there as well, and should get a fair share of carries. And like I said, Chris Peterson, if you're in a PPR league, Chris Thompson is the guy that should provide hopefully a little bit more value in the passing game. Alshon Jeffrey is officially being put on IR. It seemed like in that Monday Night Football game between the Giants and the Eagles, every other play, it seemed like another Eagle was going down. I think they had 3 guys at one point in that game being carted off the field. Um, and with Alshon Jeffrey, obviously that's going to provide opportunity for Nelson Aguilar if he gets healthy. That's going to provide. They recently released Mac Hollins, who is now with Miami Dolphins. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside went down with an injury in that game. We will see if he comes back healthy for next week. Really, at this point, I don't know who to trust in that Philadelphia passing game. I mean, they may just, other than Zach Ertz. I mean, it was so bad that they actually had Josh McCown ready to line up at wide receiver, which he actually did many, many years ago for the Detroit Lions. That's how desperate they were at wide receiver. I think they had 1 or 2 left on the roster after all those injuries. So look at them possibly making a couple of moves, but really in terms of that passing game, it's all going to come down to really Zach Ertz at this point, and we'll see kind of who else kind of steps up in practices and who's saying what about them in as far as the rest of the season goes. Another one, this is more of a small name, Auden Tate. He's one of the, I believe right now, the number 2 wide receiver for the Bengals. The only reason I bring this up is because last week the Bengals activated John Ross, and so he was back, only had a couple of catches in the game, only a couple of targets. But just the fact that he is coming back and now Auden Tate's going on IR, obviously the 2 main wide receivers for the Bengals now are going to be Ross and I just blanked their slot receiver Tyler Boyd. Those are their 2 main wide receivers. Alex Erickson isn't going to pose much of a threat in terms of playing time to them. So as long as Ross it looks like he's fully healthy, he could be jumping back up into fantasy relevance again. He was, I want to say, the wide receiver 15 after the first 3 weeks before he had his injury. So John Ross may provide some fantasy value. The last one is Paris Campbell, and this basically tells you that almost no one is healthy in terms of wide receivers for the Indianapolis Colts. T.Y. Hilton is still week to week. They don't know when he is going to be back. Paris Campbell now goes on IR. Basically, Zach Pascal becomes the main wide receiver again, which it's kind of been an on again, off again, whether or not he's actually going to produce for fantasy numbers. This is really good for Jack Doyle. I think he continues to provide fantasy value, so he should be in good shape. A great DFS play coming up this next week as well. So those are most of the big names that I believe that went on IR this week that have some sort of fantasy impact.
All right, so my question to you is this. Adrian Peterson is expected, obviously, to be getting more carries. How much do you think that Adrian Peterson has in the tank?
I mean, he seems to have a fair amount in the tank, a little bit left in the tank, not a ton. I think the gas is getting a little sludgy as you get to the bottom of the tank, so he has a burst of power here and there, but it's definitely showing signs of age, and considering how long he's been playing and how many yards he has put up and how much mileage he has on his body, not just from injuries and from playing in the NFL, but think about how much he was running the ball at OU, at Oklahoma. He's put a lot of yards on those legs, and so the fact that he has made it as far as he has is phenomenal. Really kind of defying nature in a way. I think he's got a little bit left in the tank. As far as next year goes,
yeah, he
is nowhere on my draft radar anywhere. He's another one of those guys that he will be if anything, a waiver wire guy that just kind of sits there for a while, and hopefully, maybe you'll pick him up if, again, we're dealing with the Darius Guice injuries. So.
Let's talk about reality football with Adrian Peterson. Do you feel that he's on a roster in 2020?
I think that he's on a roster, at least for training camp.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. I as, beyond that.